Hey there everyone! Today in this video I'm painting one of my all-time favorite flowers, and that is the beautiful, awesome, wonderful magnolia flower. I love, love, love the magnolia. There's so many different varieties and so many different colors to choose from, but I also love some of the qualities they represent, such as perseverance and endurance, and some of the things they symbolize like beauty, purity, love and joy, all such wonderful words. So join me in this video as I paint this buttery yellow flower of the magnolia tree. And don't forget to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, you guys. We'll see you in the video. Hey everyone, so I want to do a little painting here. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I got this picture couple of springs ago, I guess now, at a nursery when I was out there with a friend of mine. And I love, love, love magnolias. So this one caught my eye because of the beautiful buttery color that it is. I love that buttery color. It just makes me want some warm bread. Don't know why. Warm bread and butter is awesome. So this is just that beautiful, soft, flowy tulip kind of shape to it. And now the challenge is for me is to mix up that color, which is kind of a struggle. I've been working through some swatches and trying to figure out which mixture is going to work the best. So I'll show you the swatches in a second, but this other one is pretty cool because you've got all the really great branches in the background, and I may just combine and pull branches from that picture and put them into this composition. But I've already drawn it out on the paper, and I've got when I drew it out, this has already kind of got this curve to it, but I curved it this way a little bit more, and I've got some line going this way and this way. I really like how that's looking. So let me show you my swatches. First side I was working with yellows and oranges and some of those more earth tones like the raw sienna and yellow ochre, and mixed up some, I can't remember, I didn't label those, but they're not quite that, they're not quite. This one is close, but I really want to get closer than that. So I flipped my side and switched around colors. And this one I didn't label either, but I just did it. So this is Scarlet Lake with just a touch of Scarlet Lake with Holbein's Naples Yellow. And I want to point out, let's see, it's Winsor and Newton Scarlet Lake, but the Naples yellows, and this is often how it is in a lot of the colors, they vary a little bit from brand to brand. So if I say I used a Naples yellow by Holbein and you have a Naples yellow by Daniel Smith, it's likely to be a bit different. So just keep that in mind. You're going to want to swatch out your own colors and just figure it out. That's how we learn. So I've got my drawing done. Like I said, I'm going to leave it flipped to this side because I do like that Scarlet Lake. And also, I have this sheet of paper here, so it's a good idea to when you've got your color mixture before you go onto your paper to actually test it out on this extra sheet of paper. So I'm going to be doing, I think I'm going to start with my number 6. This is a Princeton Heritage 4050 round. I just got it, so it's brand new. Got a really nice tip on it still. I haven't scrubbed it out to death. So I'm going to start with my little guy over in this and pay attention to the center. My center is right here, and everything, petals are coming out from that center. So I'm going to start with a little bit deeper mixture so I can get that center part just started. So what I think I'll do is mix up a little bit of of burnt orange. And I should try not to do that. It's getting the palette wet. That messes with the paint to water ratio. So when I'm trying to get a thick mixture and I've got water all over my palette, it does not work so well. So I've got that really nice burnt orange. I'm going to add to that do a little lemon yellow. Lemon yellow has a little opacity to it. So that's a pretty thick mixture. If you can see that, it's not running on my palette. It's pretty much like a creamy, almost buttery consistency. So I'm going to just start with a little bit of that kind of action in there. And then what I'll do, I think I want to even add a little bit of that burnt orange to my puddle here and get my brush a little bit wet, and I'm going to just start coming out from that center. And coming out more on the Naples yellow. And over here, I'm just going to come around with some shapes that would indicate it's a tulipy shape. And I'm going to get my brush wet and just spread that around a little bit. And come over here. And as I come into that center, it's going to bleed out a little bit. Then I'm going to add a little more of that Scarlet Lake, and it was, I better keep it out. Let me keep that out. Just a touch of that. And coming into a couple of different areas there. And maybe a little more Naples yellow. Oops. That was lemon. Naples yellow, maybe a little bit of lemon mixed in with it. How about? Lemon yellow brightened that up a bit, didn't it? So I'm just going to drag some of that color around. I've got a little bit of that stamen action going on in the center there. I've got some mineral violet, and I can touch that into there too. Touch in a little bit more. I'm going to really try to keep this loose and fluid and not get hung up in the detail. Got to keep telling myself that because it's super, super easy for me to way overgo into the detail part. I love detail. It's going to drop a little bit of darker areas in there. A little bit of cobalt blue into that. It's going to gray that orangey color down, so I can just touch in a little bit of darker spots. It's still a little bit wet, so I can work with that a little bit. And you see how I'm flicking? It doesn't always have to be a stroke. You can flick, you can drag and lift. Okay, so now I'm going to come up into this little lady, and we're going to start with this, you know, little curvy, flowy, leave some light areas. Come in with some little darker areas. A little bit more water. And let it flow. Let it flow around. Got a little too much brown there. So there's a little bit of blue, kind of like that. That looks good. So wouldn't mind seeing that a few more places. There's a couple of lines in there that I'm just dabbing in some shadowy parts. It's when the paint is still wet that you can play around with adding color and letting it soften and flow around. So that's a pretty good start there. Let's mix up a little burnt umber and a little bit of cobalt blue to get a nice gray for the stems. I'm going to come straight up with my full arm. If you drag the brush with your full arm rather than this, you're better off because you're able to get a more of a straight line without having these kinds of marks on your paper. I use my pinky to stabilize. And then while that is still somewhat wet, I can get a little bit of, let's see, a little bit of burnt raw sienna and cobalt for kind of some of this muted, a little bit of this too. And then they can blend together. And how about some yellowy green? I'm just going to add a bit of leaf green to that. And maybe a little bit of green gold. Actually, I think this is olive next door. Oh, no, serpentine. I don't want to use that because that granulates. Olive green is right this side of green gold. So let's get a little bit of that and touch that in. Now I want to encourage you to use the colors that you have on your palette. I just rinsed my brush off and I'm lifting out some of that color with a thirsty brush. and softening some edges here. Yeah, experiment mixing colors from your own palette. I will never tell you not to go shop for color, but it's really important to learn to use the colors that you have already. Learn your color wheel, and that goes a long way toward your progress. And I'm just going to drag this my full arm, and I'm going to give it a couple of little jags. And let's go off of there. Yellow ochre, not yellow ochre, raw sienna. Go back to that green. And not to forget about this little guy over here. Come right up. Leaving little areas of light is good. So I'm dragging my brush and releasing it to get that nice tip up there. And then I'm coming back in while that's still wet and just drag and release. And drag and release. And this bleeding into there is beautiful. I love that about watercolor. That's one of my favorite things, is when the paint just bleeds and blends and flows together. And this one I'm going to come this way, I think. Come that. And then up right off the page. And then we're going to do a couple of sprigs here. Need to be up on the tip of my brush. And voila, we've got that nice flow to our flower composition. And I can come up here. This is still pretty wet, so I can touch in a little extra blue to that puddle. Darken it up a bit in between the little elbow there. Let's soften that a bit. And I think we can let that sit. I really love this right here. I love the way those blended together and how this is also blending together. So pretty. A little bit darker down there. Just the flick of the brush. You don't have to do a ton. Just a little flick of the brush. And I'm going to let this dry, take a step back, and see what I want to do next. Okay, so I've had a chance to step back from this a little bit and try to figure out what I want to do next. So I'm playing around with the idea of putting some leaves. In fact, that's what I'm going to do because I sketched them in when I was off camera. And I wanted to try to figure out the kinds of greens and what else I could do to complete this painting. They're not quite as buttery as I like, or was aiming for. That's okay. I really like how this is feeling, so I'm going to keep going with it. I really like how my little blossoms, little buds look, and I like the overall feeling, the movement that's going on in here. So I've done a couple of things. I went on, just typed in Google search, and pulled up some yellow color palette. You can type in yellow color schemes and come up with all kinds of different options to help direct you to, the place that you want to go. I liked this, but I'm not sure if it's going to work so well with my thing that's going on here. I also like this one. It's a little bit more muted, a little deeper, smokier green in here. And I think that's kind of what I am going to go with as far as the greens go. Now the picture that I had that I took, these magnolia tree that this one was on didn't have the leaves developed yet, but I can see here they are starting to come out. So I'm going to kind of go with that idea that they're just starting to come out. So I've drawn them in just small. And so I pulled up some pictures on my iPad and just was taking a look at some of them. I like this one, gives me an idea of how to place them in the painting. So that one I can click on view file and just get a close view of what that might look like. So I'm just gonna keep that open and just go for it. Sometimes you just have to go for it. I'm not really sure. I don't have in my head a good plan, so to speak, but I'll know it when it starts developing. Sometimes you just have to take a step forward, and then the watercolor, the painting kind of tells you where to go by just what's happening with the way the paint's flowing or whatever. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to start mixing up some paints and go from there. So I've got in my hand, you can't see any of the words on it because I've used it so much I've worn it all off. But I could go back to the number 6 that I was using before. In fact, let's just stick with that. I'll go back to the 4050 Princeton round number 6. And over here, I've already been kind of playing around with some different greens. This is sap green with burnt umber and some lamp black. So it's kind of got that smoky-ish feel to it. I also mixed up some, let's see what this is, turquoise, ultramarine turquoise. I added some sap green and some lamp black to that. I might have put a little burnt umber in there too, but I kind of like that for the more shadowy. And I'm going to remember that the sun is kind of hitting from this direction. In my photo, it was coming, let's see, right side up. Yeah, it was coming from this direction. This direction. It's hard to point to that. Yeah, so I've got more light up over here. So the leaves under here should be a little bit more in the shadow. Leaves up here should be a little bit more sunlit. So that's what we're going to do. Let's get started. Get bold, get started. Just put some paint down. I think I'll start with my mix of that ultramarine turquoise. It's got kind of a greenish tinge to it. I do believe I'll add some sap to that. So let's just get a nice, deep, rich mixture of that. And then adding a little lamp black to that to tone it down and gray it down. And a little burnt umber. And let's just go from there. Up in here, I have sap green. I want to mix these petals up so they're ready to go, so I can put the paint down on the fly. If you do that, if you wait until one is too dry and then you put down the other next to it, they don't have that opportunity to bleed and fuse together. So I want to make sure that I have the paint ready to go so I have the best chance of seeing some nice color bleed. So this is Hansa Yellow Light by Daniel Smith. A nice sunny green, so I'll put that down. I might add a touch of burnt umber to that as I'm going. Sometimes mixing on the paper works better than mixing it up on the palette and putting it down. You just get some really great color variations if you do it that way. So let's just go for it. I'm going to start right at the edge of this little guy, and that's a pretty thick mixture. If you can see that, it is very dark and pretty thick. And I'm just going to bring that right next to the edge of my flower, and that, my friend, makes the petal pop out. Then I've just grabbed a touch of that mixture of sap green and Hansa, and I'm gonna just drag that right along here. And really liking how that pulled the petal out there. So I'm gonna continue that over onto this section. We're gonna come right next to the stem there. Come right over. Now the paint, as I'm laying it down, if you can see, it's got a puddle on top of the paper. So I know when it's like that, I've got a really nice wet mix of paint. So I can come right along beside that, and there's going to be a really nice color bleed. So back to the mixture, and I rinsed my brush off. I rinsed my brush, and then I brought it back into that petal of the lighter green, the sunnier green. I'm imagining that my little leaf here has the sun just hitting the very tippy tip edge of the leaf. And so that's why I'm putting that sunnier green there. And I just am using a thirsty brush. I rinsed this brush off and got a lot of the moisture off, and then I'm just gonna come along the paint where I've already put it down and drag it out with the tippy tip of my brush. These are going to be a little bit sunnier. And I've got some a little bit browner green there. So I'm going to come right over the top, right over here. And that bled a little bit more than I wanted, so I rinsed my brush. I'm going to come back in, lift out some of that, come right along here and soften it so it looks like it was there to begin with. And just going to add a little bit more of that green in there. Mix up a little tiny puddle of a little bit more Hansa yellow in there and just punch that in. A little bit more brown-ish stuff. And bring that right up there. Okay, so back to the darker mixture, and I'm grabbing a little of that puddle too. It's got a little bit more burnt umber in it, and I'm going to come right underneath this guy, or off to the side, I should say, and kind of form the shape of that flower with that dark green. I'm going to come right, I think right along here. Let's give it a little movement there. And then I'm going to come right here with that bright green, sunny green mixture and let those two just bleed together. I think a little bit more brown up in here though, just a tiny bit. And then let that fuse together on the paper. Fun thing to do as well is just to touch in little bits of the sky color, which I'm thinking that's what I'm going to use that blue mixture for. That's Cobalt Blue and the ultramarine turquoise. That gives the look that the sky is reflecting into, the sky color is reflecting into the leaf. And magnolia leaves are great because they're shiny. And so you can play around with that reflected color. Let's mix up a little bit more of that. Cobalt Blue, ultramarine turquoise. And I'm going to dilute that a little bit by getting some more water on my brush before I pick up the next little bit of color. And then I'm just going to let that bleed and flow on that one edge. This guy over here is going to be pretty dark all the way through. I might want to add a little bit more of the ultramarine turquoise to that. Pretty thick mix of paint here. There's quite a bit of pigment in there, so that's going to make it darker as it dries. So watercolor dries darker. I might add a little bit of green up there. Watercolor dries lighter, excuse me. So when you put the paint color down and it's light already, it's just going to get lighter as it dries, and vice versa. It's going to, if you put a dark, not vice versa really, what am I trying to say here? If you put a thicker mix down, it is going to stay darker because you have more paint. Very carefully painting around that guy. And I can come back in and lift a little bit after that's dry too. I can drop in a little of that blue over here. Doing this is going to give the colors more variety. If you just paint one green or one whatever color it is you're using at the time, and you don't vary it up, it just kind of gets a little boring. So it's fun to vary those colors by mixing up different combinations. And I think what I'd like to do here is grab some of that Naples yellow and just drop it in right here. Give a little fusing of the colors, the two different colors, the leaf and the flower blossom. Pretty thick there. Kind of like how that looked, so I'll probably do that again. If you see something that happens that you like, it's a good thing to put it on repeat and do it again. So a fun way to do leaves like this is to use your brush, and you're going to start with the tip of it and press down and release. Come on the other side, press down and release. You come up on the tip of your brush, you're going to get that nice pointy petal. So let's get a little combo here. And we've got a little line that could be the center. Come right beside that, press down and come up. Press down and come up. And I'm going to spread that paint out a little bit so it doesn't puddle in one spot. And then I can also drop in a little bit of darker. Come along this other side that's more in the sun, where the sky's coming down, and put in a little bit of that blue. Let's do a little bit here of a lighter. I'm holding my brush kind of upright and starting with the very tippy tip, pressing down and dragging up, pressing down and releasing that. Then let's come along with some extra color there. A little bit of blue on this one too, how about? I got a little messy right here, but that's okay, remember? We're just gonna drag that right into the stem and let those two just kind of fuse together. And right here, kind of roll the tip of my brush to get it back to a point. And we're gonna start press and release, press and release. You get a nice little center happening there where the line is. And I'm gonna come over back here and just work around these petals and work around that stem. Probably could have painted my flower or my leaf first, but I really wasn't sure. And that's okay, you know, sometimes you just have to make adjustments as you go. I didn't quite know what I wanted to do until after I actually saw the flowers. I'm going to press a little bit up here. And then this is starting to tell me the direction that I want to go. I'm going to add a little bit more of that Hansa. And I think what I want to do is get a little bit of raw sienna in that. Kind of make it a little bit more golden. So in doing that, I am varying up the color of the leaves. I like how that looks. That kind of turned out cool. We're just going to go. That can come right off the page. And then this couple of leaves back in here, we can start just adding them. I wanted to do the leaves to help my flowers to pop out. So if there's nothing behind them, these light colors, you don't really, there's not much to define them. If they're light against light, you can't really see. I'm just going to come right over the top of that. And we're going to come right back over the top of that. And play with it in that way. And I can do the same thing over here, starting press and release, and then just fill in the center, press and release. Starting on the outside edge, and then you can drag the paint inside to fill in your form. I want to come right up there. And let's come up here too. See how I just went right over the top of that, and that paint that I just put down is lighter. So it's going to let the darker part of that branch stand out. And how about a little bit of raw umber in there on that one. Dabbed off some of the paint, and I just came back with a thirsty brush that still had a little bit of color and soaked up some of that didn't quite work out. And again with the burnt umber, Get a little burnt orange, and let's see, how about some lamp black to kind of come on that side. Gonna give that a little more definition. And I'm trying to be aware of the paint that's still wet down here. It's really easy to get my hand in it. So I really am liking the feel of this, and I think I'm going to stop for a minute and take a step back and see what next. Okay, it's another chance to be bold here because I think what happens is you get to a place where you feel like you've had some success, which I feel like I'm at a place where I really like this, but I want to take it to the finish line. So what do? I'm kind of conflicted on the coloring that I had first thought about doing. Now it's kind of taking on, you see, as I was saying before, it's kind of directing me as I go where to take it from here. So what's the next step? I started thinking, oh yeah, I really like these more, they're not necessarily muted, but it's a more calm, I guess. This is more vibrant and energetic. These are very calm feeling, but I really like this, that blurry, fuzzy background might be kind of cool back in here. So that is what I think I'm going to do. And over here, I'm going to gray it down a little bit. Yellow and gray go really well together, and that shows up even in this photograph with the sidewalk or gravel or whatever it was, and the grays of the branches against the yellow. And in this color palette here, you see the gray and the yellow, sunflower in the gray background. So the grays are kind of throughout here. You can see this even though it's dark, it leans toward more of a gray. So if I dilute that a little bit and bring it over here, it could be really nice. So that's what I'm going to try to do, is focus on getting some of those rich, vibrant, but a bit more subdued for this background under here. And let's just see where it goes. See what this does. And I think for this, I'm working in a small space, so I'm going to stick with my number 6 brush. This time, I'm going to start with some burnt orange. See what happens with that. Maybe try out a little Naples yellow mixed with that burnt orange. And I said it earlier, but I think maybe the Naples has got more opacity to it, so it's a little bit more creamy, I guess you could say. So as I put the mixture of Naples in with my burnt orange, it gives me a nice creamy, caramely kind of orangey. And then I'm going to add a brighter yellow to this one, which might be nice to go with. Let's try that Hansa again and see what we get. I've got some green in there, but I'm going to grab it from the outside edges. So that's kind of nice there too. Let's do it. But before I do it, I'm going to go ahead and get this Phthalo Blue. And that is very blue. And if I add this, let's see, let's add burnt umber to that. Whoops. It's a little sticky. So add a little bit more water, and then I'm kind of green. And then, so green and red are going to be more of that grayed down. So maybe if I add a little bit of, yeah, that's it. So that was a little bit of alizarin. What you have to remember is complementary colors gray each other out. So where I saw a little bit of green happening in there because of the blue and the burnt umber mixture, I wanted it not so green, so I added the red, which was the alizarin, and that brought me to a more gray color. Okay, I want to get this a little bit wet, a little bit damp, and just drop those oranges into this. And then as I come over here, I'm going to be working more with the grayed down color of the burnt umber phthalo blue alizarin mix. Just kind of pop in those colors, and I'm going to let them spread and dilute, soak up some of that puddle. I don't want it to be hard edges in here. I want it to be more just like you're seeing some blossoms kind of coming through. The Naples. So putting the water down first allows me a little bit more time to kind of think about where these colors are going. The greens are kind of bleeding in a little bit. That's okay. Some of that, there's probably green back there. And maybe even leaving a little bit of light untouched paper. Gives your eye a rest. And I might even think about touching in a little bit of that gray. Just dabbing a little bit of that in there, here and there. That'll give a little bit of relief, I'm thinking, from the bright pops of color in there. A little bit more yellow, or not yellow, a little bit more water. Help that spread around a little bit more. Maybe I'll start adding a little bit of the blue up in here. Transition from the foliage and the blooms to maybe where the sky is poking through a little bit. Can come over here with that. Just want to bring a little around this petal here. More of the green, smoky, because I've added a little lamp black, so it's kind of grayed down. And I'm just going to kind of drag that out and soften it so I can think about what I want to do next up in there. If I want to do more of the blues, kind of liking that actually. So let's bring it right there and let those two kind of fuse and bleed together. Little pops of yellow up in there, or yeah, yellow orange up in there. I'm just touching in and letting things fuse and mingle, mix and mingle. A little bit more of that sap green, and let's get some burnt umber with that. Tone that down just a bit. The burnt umber will just naturalize those greens that are a little bit bright. Sap green is pretty good. It's a little bit brighter than I wanted right there, but all I had to do was add the burnt umber and brought that down a notch. And we'll take a step back and take a peek at what this is looking like in a bit. I do like sometimes to cause intentional blossoms. That's fun. And that's simply done, if you pay attention right there, it is adding more water than paint into a damp area of your paper. So that's what that was. And let's play around with some random leaf shapes. I might just leave that paper white over there. I'm kind of liking that. But over here, I do want to get a little bit more grayed down. See what a nice gray that made, those three, the mixture of those three colors. Again, that was phthalo blue green shade, burnt umber, and alizarin crimson. And you just have to play around with mixing those things. If you start mixing and you see it's a little too blue, then add some burnt umber, and then you get a little too green, you're going to pop in a little bit of alizarin and just play around until you see the color that you like happening on the paper. And again, coming over here with a little bit of water to extend behind these branches, that gray. Before I do anything here, I do want to take a step back and see if I like it or not. Sometimes, well, always, it's a good idea to take a step back and analyze things. See what the painting's telling you for what's next. And that's where we're at right now. So I'm going to stop and take a step back and see what next. You guessed it. I'm really liking the overall feeling of this. The color choices here, I feel, are really harmonious. They really feel nice. There's probably still going to leave this alone and let it be what it is. I kind of am toying with the idea of darkening that up a little bit over here, a little bit more of that blue, but more grayed down. So I'm going to blend the two that are sitting there together, which is the phthalo, and I'm just going to bring a little bit more phthalo into that with the gray. And I think what I want to do too is just start out a little bit wet, so it softens as I put it down. So I'm going to just kind of work around. I really like the blossoming that happened in there, so I want to leave that alone for the most part. Just keep it to that beautiful, beautiful, beautiful color that it was. And I'm going to pop in a little bit of this, which I mixed before, and now I'm not really sure what it is. I think I put a little bit of Cobalt Teal into that blue, that phthalo blue. So add a little bit of the orange right next door to that, just to give it a little pop. Complementary colors, remember? Just do that, just do it. And the darker that got, this pops the Magnolia forward, and this I felt like needed to come. This is why we stand back and analyze, because sometimes when you're so up close, you don't necessarily see what's going on. So I feel like I didn't come behind this branch, so it just stopped right there, and I want to continue that on. So that's what I'm doing there. And then I felt like this wasn't enough of a contrast, or the petal didn't stand out as much, so I thought it would be nice to gray that down just a little by putting some of the gray over the top of it. And that is going to help that petal come forward. And I plan on coming in with a blender brush and lifting out some color. So that's kind of up ahead. Stay tuned. And I like the where that headed. So I want to put a little bit more sap green, Hansa yellow, and I kind of have it in that little puddle there. So I want to come right along this and add a little of that. I've got some crumbles in my paint, and you're going to find that happens. Most of the time I leave them alone until it's dry, because if you start putting a wet brush into your little damp paper and you don't want to have these blossoms happen, then you're setting yourself up for disappointment, because that's what happens when you put a wet brush or a damp brush into paint that is not fully dry. So I'm just softening that out. I like that little feel over there. So I'm going to leave that alone. And then I think what I'll do is take my paper here that's got my beautiful magnolia and start strengthening up some of these inside petals. Give it a little bit of depth and bringing a little bit of the negative painting into that. That'll help some of the lighter petals pop out too. And I'm going to come in with a little bit of a greener feeling of that yellow. And a little bit more grays in here to bring that shadowy part of the petal back and allow the rest of that to look like it's in the sunshine. And honestly, guys, I am just going on a feeling now. I'm not, really, you're not what? Just going on a feeling. And that's all I have to say about that. It's got a little bit of definition in there. And I rinsed my brush, and I'm going to come along, I think this edge here, and just soften that. And this edge here, and just soften it. So a lot of times what I'll do is put a color down, a line down, and then come right along with a damp brush and soften that. I gotta say, I'm really liking this gray. I think I'll come in a little bit in here with some of it. I like some pops of this Naples too, just to brighten it up a little bit. Right there's a good place. Here's a good place. I'm just going to add little flicks of color. A little bit more of that gray in here. Seems to be a nice shadow color for my tulip shaped flower petals that this beautiful magnolia is. And I also want to come in and add some of this, maybe even just a bright or burnt orange part up in here for these, some of these parts. Nice pop there, I like that. Now I'm gonna get my number 2 long round, and I'm gonna get a nice thick dark mix of that burnt orange and start adding some flicks of darker accents. Like, let's just go right in here and right in here. Not the same size, but just little pops. There's not anything in there. And we're gonna do a couple flicks there. Oops, let's just make it a flick that you don't know where it's coming from. Dab it out. It was a little too much of a flick. A little bit more of the lamp black to kind of tone that down. I'm really just kind of grabbing colors that are on my palette and grabbing whatever's there. And if it's got other colors mixed in, I'm not sure what they are at this point, but I know that they're in the general idea of what I want in here. So I'm just going to start adding some little background fuzzy faded, that's blue really, so I'm going to get a little bit more cobalt blue into my mixture and just get a little bit of paint on there, dip my paint in the water to dilute it a little bit, and then just start coming in with random branches that are just in no particular shape or form. A little bit of dabbing there. Some of them can be darker, some of them can be lighter. That was a little too much water. They don't all have to be one solid line. You can vary that up. You can drag your brush for some dry stroke looks and jag it. A little bit of dabbing. I didn't like that so much. It's too blue. So I'm coming back into my burnt umber and adding a little bit of that to that cobalt blue mix. Fingers work well. Diluted. Paint runs out of, your brush runs out of paint. Don't go back into the petal. Maybe just continue to spread it out and dilute. Gives you that distant fuzzy look. Some of them are going to be a little bit more defined. And I don't want to get too carried away. I got to stop myself and make sure that I don't do that, because I can easily get all hung up in adding too much, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to add a little bit more. Add a little bit of water to that to fuzz it out a little bit. And this is the calligraphy, the candy that you save to the end. You don't want to do these detail kinds of things in the start of the painting, reserve them until the final. It's like the icing on the cake, so to speak. And I think even some really pops of blue in here. Be kind of nice. And I'm gonna just drop a little bit of water in there and fuzz those out as well. This is where we have to stop and tell ourselves we're done. That was a little too blue. Oh, did you see what I did there? Oh my goodness, dang it. So I smudged that pretty good, didn't I? I just got this little blender brush, so let's see how well it does. This is the new blender brush I got. It's a Princeton velvettouch 3/8 of an inch blender. And I haven't really used it too much. Most of the time I use this one for some fine lifting. This one I think might be nice for something like this where I need to scrub out just a little bit of a mistake. Because that definitely is a mistake. I didn't want a smudge across my flower. So let's see how this works. I'm gonna just touch in that blender brush. Just a little tiniest bit of scrubbing. And this paper, I believe is pretty good as far as that goes. And it's not going to damage the surface of the paper. So there you have it. You can lift stuff out if you make a mistake or, you know, get color where you don't want it. I do like that brush, but it is a little bit too thick for the finer little detail things. Like this, I want to lift out a little bit right along the edge. So it looks a little bit more like it's meant to be there and not. It had kind of an unnatural look to it. So I wanted to lift out that. And then this as well, I want to just kind of soften this little edge. So I'm getting this brush wet, coming along that edge, and then brushing off the color that I've lifted. And this, I want to do the same thing here. I want to do a little bit of lightening. And I'm going to do that here. Probably should have done that on the top. It's okay. And right here. Let's do a little bit here. Just get a little lighter spot on that. Dab my paper towel on it. I got a little of the same thing happening there where I touched it with the palm of my hand. As hard as you try, there are times you're gonna find that you've done that. So lift out a little bit of these not too much. And I'm just kind of dragging my brush, not scrubbing necessarily, but just stroking, and then I'm able to lift out little bits of color. And you can't always do that as well. If the color is a staining color, it's not going to lift out as easily. So it depends on the color. Rinse, dab off the excess, and easily lift out some color. All right, you guys, I think I'm going to stop. I will take a step back before I actually end this video and just see if there's anything else to do. I just want to take a final look and we'll come back and go from there. But overall, I think I'm pretty happy with this. I am pretty happy with this. I just don't know if there's more to do or not. So let's take a step back. I'm going to take a look at it with a fresh eye, kind of walk out of the room and go get a cup of water or a glass of water or something, and then come back. Oftentimes when you leave the room, walk away for a little bit and then come back in, you've got a fresh eye and you can kind of see, you can see better, not kind of, you can see better what the painting is telling you at that point. So let's take a step back. Okay, so when I took a step back, there was a couple of things, a couple of areas. Most of it I really am happy with. I don't feel like there's enough contrast here. And this leaf here is kind of bugging me. So I'm going to lift a little bit of this green color with that blending brush here. Does a really nice job, by the way. And I think I'll leave that light area. And then on the inner part of that, this is my number 4 long round. I'm going to grab a little bit more Naples yellow and come right in the inside edge of that and come right in there with some little line work, which I haven't done too much of, and it's really tempting to come back and do extra. And then that would kind of not be what the painting was starting out like, which was more loose. So I'm going to grab a little bit more saturated color in here and bring that orange out. So let's grab a little bit more burnt orange, brighten it up by not adding the extra colors to it. And then I'm going to get some of that Hansa yellow. Oop, that's a little too much. Hold on. Lift that out, but I do want it to be a little bit more saturated in here. Grab a little bit of the Naples and let's pull that along this. That should help that petal pop out a little bit more. And then I'm going to come in right along the base of that. And that should help that pop out. And I think the other thing to do with this one is to push it back a little bit because it's kind of competing with that petal. But I'm going to have to dry the petal of the flower first so they don't bleed together. So I'm going to get a little bit of Cobalt Blue and add it to this little mixture of green. Cobalt Blue is cooler, and so it's going to push this leaf back a little bit. We go like this without getting it too dark. And that should help. Cleaned a little tiny spot on my palette because I think this needs just a little punch. And so we're going to punch it up with very, very dilute mix of that blue, Cobalt Blue, and touch of raw umber. So let's just do that and plop down a little color. And that is so diluted, it's just going to barely tint the paper, but I thought it would be nice. To add just the slightest little hint of that. Okay, I really do like where this has gone, and gotta be careful not to ruin it by dropping paint and water in. Definitely is easy to do when you're working with watercolor. You can just tend to slop things around and get a big mess made. And I'm going to use my #1 round Utrecht brush to sign my name. And I'm going to do that with this mix of blue and whatever else that was. And I'm just going to sign off on it and be done and move on to my next painting. That's always super exciting to be able to finish something and move on. More than enough things I want to paint and not nearly enough time. Thanks for watching, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video and you go out and try something like this yourself. Don't forget to take your camera on your walks and get inspired by your surroundings. We will see you in the next painting. Thanks again for watching. Bye-bye.